So guys, you've decided on getting a CFMOTO NK, but you aren't sure which one to go with. Do you go with the lighter and the more agile but cheaper 450 NK, or do you go with its bigger brother, the 800 NK, that's going to give you more power, more customization, but be more expensive? Don't worry, in today's video, we're going to be comparing both of these bikes to let you guys know which one is right for you. Now guys, for the last couple months, we've been lucky enough to have both of these bikes on loan from CFMOTO, and over that time, I've been able to put some decent amount of miles on them to find out the real pros and cons that each bike is bringing. Now, I know if you just look at these bikes, they look very similar, which is honestly a pro in CFMOTO's design aesthetics for their NK line, but when you get these things on the road, I feel like they ride very differently. So, first off, we're going to do some spec breakdown of both bikes just so you guys understand what they're bringing to the table, and then after that, I'm going to get them out on the street, and I'm going to tell you guys who these bikes are for. You might want to stick around because at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you guys which bike I prefer, and I think it might surprise you. So guys, first thing we got to talk about with the 450 NK is just how easy it is when it comes to handling. This bike's got a nice handlebar, it gives you a good purchase on the bike, and it's so light that this bike takes nothing to flick back and forth. In a parking lot situation, man, this thing is agile as anything. You're gonna have a fantastic time, and it's not gonna be hard to handle in at all, like in any situation. There's just no weight behind it at all. Traction control not happy with me there. The next thing we're going to talk about on the 450 is something that I think a lot of people come into this bike with some really low expectations, and that's power delivery and throttle response. Now, the 450 NK has the same motor as the 450 SS, and guys, this power plant will shock you regardless of who you are. It has such good character. It's a parallel twin with a 270-degree crank, which one means that if you put an exhaust on this, like a Yoshi exhaust, they sound fantastic. The other really cool part about this bike and the power plant is that it has plenty of power, even for an experienced rider like myself, to have a fantastic time on. The power is very punchy and it makes for a very fun riding experience. I think a lot of people see the 450 number and they automatically assume that the bike is going to be slow. This bike is not slow at all. It can easily get into triple digits for the highway if you want to take it there. And I have had no issues with power at all. And another thing that this bike really has going for it, and it's one of my favorite things these days that I look for in bikes, and that is a cable actuated throttle. So if you guys are new to riding and you maybe don't know what a cable actuated throttle is, that means that when I twist the throttle on this bike, it moves stuff in the engine and I have a direct connection to the engine with my throttle hand. The opposite of a cable actuated throttle is ride-by-wire or fly-by-wire, which is what the 800 NK has, and we'll talk about that when I'm on that bike. But the connection I feel with the engine on the 450 NK is great. I very much like it and prefer it, and it makes for a really fun ride for me. One of the downfalls of a cable actuated throttle is generally you cannot have things like cruise control and stuff like that. So it's kind of a give and take. If you want the cable actuated throttle, you can't have the other stuff. So guys, next thing I want to talk about with the 450 NK is the comfort and the riding position on this bike. Because I do feel like it could take a couple people that otherwise would like this bike and make it not really great for them. Now, from that front camera, you guys can probably see that I'm very upright on this motorcycle, and it's generally a pretty comfortable motorcycle. I would like to see the seat maybe a little thicker. Since I'm sitting upright, I'm going to end up putting more of my weight on that seat, so having a little more padding would be nice, but it's not the end of the world. And it's a generally comfortable body position, but if you are a taller rider, I'm 5'10", I got 32-inch inseam, and I fit on this bike okay, and my legs feel a little cramped up, just a little bit. But if you're a taller rider, then yeah, at least go sit on one of these, because you definitely need to find out if that lower half is going to be too scrunched up for you. Like I said, I fit fine, and I have a slightly aggressive lower half. So, you know, that makes me think, like, man, if I was a little bit taller, if I was a baller, never mind. If you're a little bit taller, go sit on one of these just to double check that you'll fit on it. Because I would not want to be sitting on this bike all crunched up if I was a lot taller. So, just go double check that. And, you know, the seat thing, that's an easy fix. You can literally just get an aftermarket seat. CFMOTO probably makes a comfort seat that would be fantastic on this bike. Now, super important with this bike and the playful nature that it has is suspension. So let's talk about that. We do not have adjustable suspension on the 450 NK, but from my experience and the riding that I have done on it, I do feel like the suspension matches the bike really well. I've said in multiple videos that the 450 NK feels like the motorcycle that Yamaha should have made instead of their MT-03. I really feel like the 450 NK feels like a tiny MT-07. It's got that playful, punchy throttle response, and the suspension is the same. It's a little bit softer, which makes it for a comfortable ride, and I love that. And honestly, I feel like CFMOTO nailed the suspension on this bike just as it is. It's, you know, not the suspension I would want if I was going to go maybe do a track day or something, but this is also not the bike I would want to go do that track day, right? It's a little soft, it's a little comfortable, a little bouncy, but I don't know, man, it just fits the characteristic of this bike incredibly well, and I think it's been helpful. If you are looking for adjustable suspension on a bike like this, I don't think you're going to be doing that. I don't think anybody has adjustable suspension on bikes this small. I would like to touch on how awesome it is that in a 450 platform, CFMOTO is giving you guys ABS and traction control. ABS is pretty normal for most bikes these days, which is, it's awesome. I love have watched ABS like get into the market to the point where even 300s have that now. But traction control is something very unique for a small bike, and anything that helps riders stay safe while riding, I'm here for. And the crazy thing is this bike is punchy enough to need that traction control. So that talk about traction control, guys, is going to lead me into my final point about the 450, and that is the comfort and confidence it gives to new riders. Like I said, the power is punchy enough to where you actually need traction control on this bike, but I think because of the lightweight and the fun amount of power, the handlebars in a good position, you can get a good purchase on the bike. I feel like that would be it. It almost creates this ideal environment for a new rider, because you're not used to riding motorcycles, so you've got a lot of stuff you're trying to learn, and you know you're probably going to accidentally dump the clutch. If you do and the bike starts standing up, that traction control is going to help bring the bike back down, because when I've been wheeling, I am dropping the clutch. I am like intentionally making the front wheel come up, and the traction control is bringing me down. Now, if you're an experienced rider and you want to turn that off, you absolutely can, but if you accidentally dump the clutch, you see that? Traction control brings it right back down. It's really cool to have a bike that's really good for early riders, that has all of those modes and gives you that safety net. Another thing I really like for new riders is that the body position is good for you getting your feet on and off the ground, especially if you're in a more urban situation like I ride in a lot. You're coming to a stoplight, you're stopping and going, blah, blah, blah. It gets old, but you can get your foot down easily to control the motorcycle, and that way, if you accidentally lose your balance or something, you start falling over, very easy to grab yourself. And I know that I almost dumped my first bike so many times because it wasn't as easy to control as this bike. And, you know, you just get off balance sometimes. You know, like maybe you're going uphill on a road and then it curves a little bit and then you have to emergency brake, you know, like little situations like that. This bike is fantastic for situations like that. Overall, I think the people that would love this motorcycle, like I said, beginner riders, people that are starting to ride, or a more experienced rider that knows what they're doing, knows how to control the bike, and is looking for a fun little bike to have. An experienced rider can have a surprisingly good time on this bike. Trust me, I know from experience. That right there is the major difference between the 800 NK and the 450 NK. The power freaking delivery, and that was in street mode, not sport mode. So guys, it's not going to surprise any of y'all for me to tell you that when you get on the 800 NK, the amount of power that this bike puts down is nuts. It is a totally different ballpark. It ain't like this bike's a little faster than the 450 NK. Like, it is by a significant margin, and you gotta be careful with that type of power. If you are a new rider, I very much do not think you should get on this motorcycle. You can get yourself in some major trouble with the amount of power you're playing with on the 800 NK. Now, luckily, with all of that extra power, and with great power comes great responsibility, but not on you. The 800 NK also comes with something else the 450 NK does not come with, and that is rider modes. You guys see this little M button that says M and then mode on it? By pressing that button, the screen and motorcycle will change to a different mode, and by doing that gives you a different power output. We have rain, we have street, and we have sport. And from what I can tell, the mode button changes massively the way the power is delivered on this motorcycle. You'd be surprised, some bikes have modes, but then all the modes feel the same. So, with the 800 NK, rain mode does a phenomenal job of killing a load of power on this bike, which you're very much going to want if you're ever in a situation like rain, or, you know, in a city setting and you want the smoothest ride possible. It not only takes the power down, but it also seems to curve the power delivery, so it's a lot smoother, a lot easier to ride a bike that's very torquey like this bike. Street mode's the mode I find myself in the most because, similar to my MT10, these bikes that are, you know, super nakeds and have tons of power, sometimes if you put them in the top power mode, the power is so twitchy coming onto you, it almost makes it hard to ride. I normally ride my MT10 in mode 2, which is the like middle power mode. I do the same thing with the 800 NK as well. Street mode's where I'm at. If you want ultimate power, you can put it in sport mode, but I'll show you guys. You see how much it just throws me around? I don't want instant power like that. Like, I need it to be smoothed out. I'm too much of an idiot on the throttle to be able to control something like that. So yeah, modes are awesome. You also have traction control. You also have ABS. For a bike like an 800 NK at the price point that it's at, to have all of the rider modes and all of the tech that this bike has on it is actually really impressive. Now, the 800 NK, to me, has a glaring issue with it that I do feel like needs to be talked about. Now, I don't know if this is the throttle or if this is the fueling on the bike, but I have noticed that with the 800NK, there is a lack of smoothness when it comes to the fueling on the bike or the throttling. Now, the reason I say the fueling or the throttling is because I'm not really sure what it is. This bike is a ride-by-wire, which means that throttle has a cable going to the computer on the bike, letting the bike know how much fuel to give itself, right? So I don't have that direct connection. I don't know if it's with the throttle or with the fuel map on the bike, but I've noticed that, and this is only, let me even more clarify, when you are on constant throttle, meaning you are giving the bike the exact same amount of throttle and you're just cruising, I have noticed that there are times when this bike will oscillate. It kind of goes forward and back. And maybe it's not, I take that back. It's not the bike going forward and back. It's my upper half kind of drifting forward, drifting back, because the bike is not giving itself a consistent amount of power as it's going, and I'm giving it a consistent amount of throttle. So there's that weirdness that really throws me off on this bike. The weird thing about it is that if you are totally decel, like no throttle, or if you are giving it throttle and going, I don't really recognize it. So the harder you ride this bike, the less you can notice it. The only people that I think would notice this issue is if you were on a city street or a highway and you were just cruising straight without using the cruise control that it has, you would then notice this. So it is a bit of a unique issue that the bike has, if you want to call it an issue, honestly. But it is definitely something I've noticed, and it's not been an issue for me. It's never caused me a near wreck or anything. But it's something that I just really don't like. I don't like the feel of me giving the bike consistent throttle and my upper half's doing like hold on, I'll stop moving. And my upper half's doing like this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like the feeling of that. So, if I'm going to be honest, that is probably the primary negative on the 800NK as a motorcycle, period. Whee! I love hauling over that hill because you get so light when you come over it. But yeah, the throttling is just not there. And the interesting thing about the throttling is I never really thought about it on this bike until I recently rode, what was it? It was a Triumph the other day. I rode some Triumph, and Triumph motorcycles are, in my opinion, some of the best throttle motorcycles you can get. They have it dialed, and they do such a good job with it. And then, coincidentally, I needed to go the next day film on this motorcycle, and when I was riding on it, I was noticing, it's like, wow, the throttle on that Triumph is so much better than that 800NK. Granted, it literally costs twice as much as this bike, so I can only complain so much. But that's what made me really start thinking about it on this bike. And as I rode this more the day I was filming on it, I was like, that's what it is. That's the weirdness that I feel on the 800NK that I really just don't like. But anyway, that's my personal gripe with the bike. And, if you've ridden an 800NK, let us know in the comments if you have felt something like that as well. Next up, let's talk about the suspension. I have not adjusted the suspension at all on this 800NK, though it does have adjustable suspension. I find the suspension really solid for casual riding. It's not as firm and capable for really hard riding. I wouldn't want to do a track day with this. I don't think the suspension would really handle that. It doesn't have the, I don't know what the word would be. Even the adjustments are not going to be enough to make this a really aggressive track bike. But it is really awesome to have a lower cost, middle weight, naked bike that has adjustable suspension. That's a pretty neat thing. And I love the fact that you can buy this bike and adjust it yourself and really get a feel and fine tune the bike. It's one of those things you don't really get on bikes at this price point very often, so it's really cool to see. So finally, let's talk about the person that I feel like is really going to appreciate the 800NK. You know, this is just one of those bikes that there should be no surprise with the relationship that CFMOTO has with KTM, because KTMs are pretty similar like this as well. But the 800 NK is just one of those motorcycles that it wants to be ridden. It does not want you to get on it and just casually putter around. It wants you to be going. And if you ride it like that, you will be rewarded for that. And if you ride it and you just putter around like blah, that is when it starts like rearing some of its negatives out. You know, the inconsistent fueling or throttling or whatever the hell it is, right? I have never noticed that if I'm just throttling up and down and going and having a good time on the bike, you will not notice it. I have actually, like, this is a funny story. I have actually let buddies that are better at riding than I am, and I know that if they experience that throttling, they would have an issue with it. And the funny thing is, none of them have said anything about it. And the reason for that is because I know the way they're riding this motorcycle is, you know, like an enthusiast. Like, you're probably speeding, you're having fun with it. And if you're riding it like that, you will never notice the downsides on this bike. If you are just kind of tooting around, you're going to start seeing them. Oh yeah, I also don't like the D-pad, but that's just personal preference. It works incredibly well, especially for the price. One thing I will hit on real quick before we wrap up this section of the video is that the 800 NK does seem to like it would fit taller riders better than the 450 NK. That's probably not a surprise, but if you are a taller rider, I would kind of push you more towards this bike. Just, you know, might be obvious, but it is what it is. The seating position seems to be a bit higher, or maybe it's the difference between where the foot pegs are or something like that. Something is better here for the taller guys. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you're actually going to ride a motorcycle, the 800 NK is going to be your guy. It kind of disguises all of the issues. So if you get this, ride the thing. Don't putter around.
As an experienced rider, if I'm picking between these two bikes, I'm going with the 450 NK for a couple reasons. One, that small, agile nature is so fun to ride. Also, that cable throttle gives me a great connection to the motorcycle, which I absolutely love. OC, let me know what bike you would pick in the comments down below after you like the video, of course. Guys, I'm Chaseontwowheels. You guys go out there and ride safe, whatever you're riding, and we'll see you on the next one.